you don't play the field from injury. You're saying
No. I mean,
Okay.
look at Shohei Ohtani. Nelson Cruz last year missed a lot
Shohei
of time.
Ohtani is pitcher. That's a little bit of a different story.
He was still considered a DH though. So
Yeah.
and Yordan Alvarez, he didn't play at all last year because he had two knee injuries,
Stanton.
and he's so young. He's 22, 23,
Yeah.
and he's not playing because of two knee injuries and two knee surgeries.
Okay.
That's what I was going to chime in with. Is it's just ironic that a lot of these DHs are older guys, start to break down, but one of the key injury questions around the DH only guys is Yordan Alvarez, who's like 23 years old, and so.
I think it works the other way. I think it's you're a DH because you have the injury issues, possibly. Not that you're not going to have injury because they're going to put you a DH. It doesn't work the other way. If they were more mobile, then they wouldn't play DH in the first place, right? I guess that's the way to look at it. Now, we noted this at the end of our show last week, but it's worth noting again here since we're talking about utility-only players. When you're doing your values and you're doing your draft, do not consider Marcell Ozuna as a utility-only player. Yes, he might initially only be allowed to be in your utility slot, but in terms of value, he's an outfielder. He's going to gain the outfield position really, really quickly because he's going to play in the National League, and the Braves will be forced to use him, and they paid him, so they want to use him. Colin Moran's another player that probably should gain third base eligibility. So when you're doing your valuations, assume that they're part of their outfield gives a small bump to Ozuna. So if you were going to get a discount for Ozuna from being the DH, my God, it's going to be even more because he's actually worth more as an outfielder. So just a little bit of tidbit of information. Ryan, you do this really cool thing that you call a Bloomboard. Can you tell everybody what a Bloomboard is? And then we'll talk about one of the Bloomboards that you have recently created.
Yeah, so Bloomboards has kind of been my thing here the last few years, and it's kind of funny, I've always done it for my own research in terms of writing my own columns at HQ and really my own draft prep. And just recently, over I guess 2 years ago, started putting it out on Twitter and branding it and that sort of thing. But basically what they are just different types of filters from different types of data sources, from Fangraphs, from StatCast. You throw on NFBC data for the market price. You kind of have all these different sources of data. You can mix those together and put together some pretty cool lists of players, essentially, that meet certain thresholds. So I could look at, for example, something like a barrel rate from StatCast and throw a strikeout rate or a chase rate from Fangraphs and see who bubbles up for guys who don't chase but also barrel it up. And then one of the things that I really try and achieve with these Bloom boards is if I have a list of 10 guys, for example, that meet a certain chase rate and barrel rate, I'll just continue with that kind of example. Where it really comes into and shines is where, like, if I've got those 10 guys and the top 5 or 6 are guys I would normally expect, like a Juan Soto, a Freddie Freeman, that kind of validates what I'm doing in terms of kind of the predictability of some of the stuff that I'm looking at. But then if you then look at the bottom of that list in terms of like ADP, and you get, for example, like a CJ Crone is a Bloomboard extraordinaire, someone who has similar types of skills when you look at those thresholds, but's going a lot deeper in drafts. Those are the guys that I'm trying to kind of uncover with these types of Bloomboards. And the thing that I also say a lot too is like, it's the start of a conversation, because a lot of time, filters are completely arbitrary, right? I'm picking and choosing a certain threshold for a barrel rate or a strikeout rate or whatever it is. So I'm just trying to kind of illuminate guys that you wouldn't normally think of as being in the same stratosphere as some of your elite players. And then you can kind of take a look in a deeper dive at like a CJ Crone, who has always had the skills, didn't have a team until recently, but if you invested in CJ Crone early in draft season, he signs with the Rockies, and you could be off to a fantastic buy with someone like that. So long story short, that's what I do. I put those out on Twitter. I try to put them out probably once a weekday. It's gotten a little bit waylaid this past week without power here at the house, but back on the train this week. And so, yeah, just follow me on Twitter at RyanBHQ, or just search for this hashtag Bloomboards, and you'll see everything come up. I put them all, just kind of the list in a little image on the tweet, and then I just try and add some context to certain players that jump out to me. And it's really fun. I get a lot of engagement from it, a lot of people chiming in on other players that show up in the list, and it just puts it's another way to slice and dice the data and look at players in a different way, and start that conversation. So it's something I really enjoy doing, and I think has a lot of value for people following along.
Yeah, I mean, if you highlight, here's 5 players. 2 of them are Mike Trout and Fernando Tatis, and by the way, these 3 also. That illuminates some people. It's sort of like maybe, Ruben, I'm sure you saw this, where they show highlights of Dom Smith of the Mets swinging and Barry Bonds swinging, and it looks like they have the same swing. Did you see that one?
I did see it. It's very similar. They have a different build, different batting stance, but the follow through and the actual swing through the zone looks very, very similar.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Not a bad player to comp to, for sure.
Exactly. I think that's the point of your bloom boards. You sent one of your latest ones that I saw out there were talking about players who really gained an ADP from 2020 to 2021, and some of them caught my eye. Teoscar Hernandez, Trent Grisham, Framber Valdez, Zach Plesac. What maybe you can talk about some players that caught your eye on this latest bloom board.
Yeah, so the biggest thing in one of my, I guess, crusades, for lack of a better word, of this draft season is recency bias, and trying to kind of put 2020 in perspective as a season that was pretty wild and was only 1/3 of a season. So what I tried to achieve with this one is looking at and I call it draft slot value, from 2020 draft to 2021, and see who are the biggest risers after just a 60-game season from the NFBC ADP. And so I say draft slot value because I try to attach auction values on certain ADPs. So, like, for example, if someone jumps from the 4th round to the 3rd round, technically it's only 1 round, maybe 15 picks. That's actually a more valuable or a bigger jump than someone later in the draft from like the 17th round to the 14th round. So that's how I kind of built this list. And yeah, it's definitely a list of interesting guys that a year ago you would not have looked at. Randy Arozarena in the 4th round. You would not have looked at Framber Valdez in the 6th round, or James Karinchak in the top 100. So it's those kinds of guys where it's like, a year ago, they weren't even on our fantasy radars. Now they are. Should they be after just 60 games? And research has shown, and we've done a lot of this at HQ, and Ron Chandler actually dubbed this extreme regression drafting. Regressions are game's most powerful force, and it works both ways. So odds are a lot of these draft risers from a year ago are going to settle and regress back down, even according to their market price. So, and I think especially on a 60-game season where we are, in my opinion, overweighting it a lot in terms of a lot of the analysis that I'm seeing, I think that's a really profitable angle to take, is to kind of fade these risers in general. And I'm not saying every single one. And then on the flip side, kind of target these kind of recency bias rebound guys whose market prices have totally dropped after a bad 60-game season. So that's kind of the point of this board, was just comparing what we thought of these guys a year ago to what we think of them now.
Some great points from the 2020 Baseball Writer of the Year right there, Ryan Bloomfield. We're talking with Ryan Bloomfield from Baseball HQ. It's now time for our ATC Player Evaluations here. And the name of the game on this show is, as you know, Ryan, you are a listener of the show. We don't talk about every single catcher or first baseman, but we talk about some potential bargains that ATC has highlighted. And the first one is Wilson Contreras of the Chicago Cubs. He's a guy that really has had a nice little career so far. His roto values in the past couple of years, 18, 11, 16, 20. As a catcher, you love that. It's consistent. His barrel rate remains high. His homer to fly ball rate was a little bit on the on the low for last year, but a rebound should be back, and 20 home runs might be likely, at least high teens for him. His strikeout rate is creeping up where his walk rate is going down, so I think his years of hitting 270, 280 are over. I think he's more of a 250 kind of guy. But what you're going to be paying for, aside from the power, is run production. He's going to hit somewhere in the middle of the lineup. Who knows who'll be left from that Cubs lineup, but for now it's intact, more or less. We're talking mid-60s homers and RBIs. He's a guy, if you look at the ATC projection volatility metrics, very low standard deviation of projections, so projections are in agreement here. His stats are very well spread across the categories. He's got a very low intra-projectional standard deviation. A lot of catchers do, but he has one of the lower ones as well. So we're talking about a stable guy who is not going to be a pain in any category. Value's been high all these years, maybe even a buying opportunity because he had a down year last year. Are you interested in Wilson Contreras, Ryan?
If I'm going to go early on a catcher, Contreras honestly is probably the guy. I think for me, he's right up there with Salvador Perez. I actually have him a little bit higher than Salvador Perez, and is going 3 rounds later in 15-team league. So Wilson Contreras, for me, for the reasons, Ariel, that you stated, kind of that consistency. He's kind of at that right kind of time in his career, 29 years old, doesn't have too much wear and tear, and actually has the 3rd most number of plate appearances of a catcher in the last 3 seasons. So Chicago plays him. They play him often, and that matters a lot in terms of value for catchers. So if I am going to go early, and Wilson Contreras is going in almost the 10th round to get arguably the number 2 catcher, in my opinion, is a little pocket of value that I would take the plunge on if I'm looking to kind of grab the bull by the horns in catchers. So I'm a Contreras fan. I like the profile, like you said, Ariel. The strikeouts are going up a little bit, but I still think he can kind of hit mid 250s, maybe 260, and still has some pop. So I like Contreras. I like the consistency, the floor, and the playing time there.
Yeah, and in an OBP league, he's undeniably the second best catcher. That OBP is fantastic compared to the batting average. Ruvain, what are your thoughts on Contreras?
Well, first of all, you mentioned his batting average. The last 4 years, listen to these batting average: 276, 249, 272, 243. Doesn't that mean he's going to hit in the 270s this year? I'm not saying he will, but, the San Francisco Giants believe in the every other year thing, so you never know. His home run to fly ball rate was down from his career average, but it's probably going to go back up because he increased his launch angle, and his barrels were the same in 2019 and it was 2020. His soft contact rate was the lowest of his career. He's hitting more line drives, and he's batting 4th. He's batting cleanup, so he's going to drive in a lot of runs, so this is a guy to buy.
Yeah. My research has shown that the more profitable, or I should say the better return on investments for catcher, especially in an auction, come from the second-tier catchers. We're not talking about the elite Real Muto, the super elite Real Muto and the elite Salvador Perez, but from catchers number 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Those actually have very good return on investments I've seen over time from my research. And why a lot of these catchers we might mention today are of the more upper echelon. Like, I'm not predicting the very, very low catchers to go. I think that it's just extracting value from where it's been a good return on investment. Our second catcher today, Yasmani Grandal, and that brings us today to the Injury Guru's Trivia of the Week.
So we're going to be talking about Yasmani Grandal now, and he happens to be 32 years old. And the catcher we're going to talk about after this is Travis d'Arnaud. He's also 32 years old. Grandal's actually 2 months older. Grandal has caught 800 games so far in his career. How many more games did he catch than d'Arnaud? In the range. It's going to be kind of hard. I'll give you the answer. d'Arnaud has caught a total of 489 games. That's a difference of 311 games. Now, both of these guys, they're completely different paths. d'Arnaud was a high prospect, traded multiple times. Grandal made his way up slowly, and made it to where he is now. But Grandal seems to be the much more durable guy. He was on pace for the same numbers last year that he was on pace for 2018. All his peripheral numbers don't show any decline yet, and he's batting right now, according to Roster Resource, 3rd in a very potent lineup.
For me, it's Grandal. He's the kind of guy where the profile is kind of vanilla, especially and I'm talking about batting average leagues only. Like Grandal could easily be a batting average suck and go below 230, and there are just a lot of guys later in the draft with a similar type of profile for me than Grandal. So I look at like playing a rebound